Hi, and welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this video, we're going to learn the 1 to 5 player Detective, a modern crime board game Season 1, designed by Ignacy and Mary Dechevicek and Veronica Spira, and published by Portal Games, who helped sponsor this video. Another unsolved case just hit your desk, and it's time for you and your team of detectives to get to work on solving it before it's too late. This is a new game in the line that first started with the original Detective that we also have a video for. And here you'd embark on sprawling cases that might take an entire evening to solve. But in this version, the rules have been modified for a faster playing 90-minute to 2-hour game when you're looking for something a little shorter that still requires your best sleuthing abilities. But whether you've played the original game or are just starting with this one, join me at the table and let's learn how to play. To set up, place the game board in the play area and then open the rulebook to the page of the case that you're going to be setting up. There are 3, and we'll be setting up the first one, Natural Causes, which has its setup instructions here, and I'll go over those with you now. First, it tells us to place this time marker on the 22 space of this area known as the time track. And then you set this marker representing the investigators onto this campus location of the board. These are the skill tokens, and you'll collect a number of them equal to 6 minus the number of players. We'll have 2 players in this game, so we'll keep out 4 and return the rest to the box. The game comes with a deck of portrait cards, but don't look at the undersides until you're instructed to. For now, take the 2 silhouettes and all the ones labeled with a 1 on the back and put them face down by the board, returning the rest to the box. You'll also find a deck for each of the 3 cases included in the game, and you'll take the one labeled with your case name on the top card, setting it by the board. But do not examine any of the cards in it yet. The other decks, of course, you can return to the box. Each player now chooses one of these character tiles, and these will have no specific impact on the game, so just pick the one you're most interested in, and you can read the back if you want to pretend to take on their personality while playing. Now get out a computer or mobile device and go to antaresdatabase.com. Once you're here, you can then log into the database itself. This represents your information network and will help you access various files, analyze evidence, store information you've uncovered, and perform other necessary steps while playing. If this is your first time playing a detective game, you'll need to register a free account and log into it. But you only need 1 account per group, and multiple players can log into it if you have several devices. Once you're logged in, you'll scroll down to the case you're playing, which for us is Natural Causes, and then select it. And we'll talk more about how you use this database very soon. Now is a good time to read the background of the case here, and then its goal, which states is to find out who murdered Professor Higgs and the motive for the crime. We've already conducted these other steps of the setup, except for these bottom 2, and now it tells us to read files at 100. Anytime the game wants you to enter something into the database, it usually comes in this format of a category, like files, the @ symbol, and then a number. So this means you go to the database and then click on File in the pop-up menu here, or if you'd like, you can go directly to Files from this submenu, and then you enter the number 100 into this area and select Search. We now get a welcome message and a reminder that we should have notebooks and pencils handy for recording our findings and ideas about the case while playing. And from now on, when you select this Files section, you'll see any previous files you unlocked here, and you can go back and access their information. This is also how you'd enter in information you're given from the game about personnel files, questioning, and other. You'd just pick their category instead. Now, signatures are a little bit different. The game will give you these as a value to enter in here, and then it will be dropped into one of these 3 categories: dactyloscopic, DNA, or material, which is what these acronyms stand for. Dactyloscopy is just a fancy word for fingerprints, by the way. And while some signatures you will have to enter manually into the database, other ones you won't. For example, this is a file you might get almost as soon as the case starts, so it's not really a spoiler, but feel free to avoid reading it if you want. The important point is that it has a signature here that you can tap on to have it added to the database automatically. After the signature is entered, it will appear under the correct subcategory for it, and you can switch between these by tapping the different headings here. Also, if a signature matches any other evidence you've collected, it will let you know here. For example, you might have previously identified someone in the database, and then a fingerprint on a hammer you entered into the database might come up as matching that person. So then you'd know at some point that person was holding it. The final step of the case setup is to gain portrait 7. When you're told to do this, go through the portraits, find that related number, and then flip it face up. You can use portraits to help distinguish the different people you might encounter and also help you make personal notes about them. 2 silhouettes are also included, so you can make notes about people you suspect might be involved but haven't quite identified yet, and you'll also get 4 special tokens that you'll only use when instructed. Taking notes will be an important part of the game. You should approach this as if you're real detectives trying to piece together various clues, because that's exactly what you'll be doing. And that's the setup. In Detective Season 1, you and the other players will be following leads, searching records in the database, and working to deduce amongst yourselves the facts and connections in the case to solve the crime. The actions you perform in the game will use up time, which you track on the board, and when time runs out, you must file your final report in the database and see how you did. A lot of the case will unfold through its deck of cards, but you may never look at any of them until you're instructed to. And here's the most important thing. There is no you win card in here. As you play, you'll make choices, and those choices will direct you to read some of the cards and not others. There are 23 cards in the deck, but you may only see 12 of them before your time is up, and that's okay. You'll never find a card that gives you the definitive answer. Like a real case, you're following leads and using your powers of deduction to reconstruct the case and reason out what happened. Then in the end, the game will ask your group a series of questions, and you'll all be ranked on what you were able to figure out. You should also be aware that the game doesn't go in turns. Instead, players will discuss together what they want to do next, and then they do it. Most of the time, this will mean picking a lead to follow. So let's see how that works. At various times, you'll be given leads by the game, like at the very start of a case in its further leads section, like we see here. At other times, you'll be presented with leads by the Antares database itself, and you can identify a lead because it will show a hashtag symbol and a number. The number will relate to one of the cards in the deck, which will have the matching number in its top left-hand corner. So here we have 4 possible leads, and at any time you can check a lead that you have access to. However, you cannot check the leads card until, as a group, you've decided you want to follow it. Many leads will have a cost, but you're not allowed to check that cost before deciding if you want to follow it. You won't have time to follow every lead you're given, as we mentioned, so you'll have to decide which ones are worth your time. Now, to help show you how following a lead works, I am going to spoil one of the cards for you. But this is the lead in the case that has you examining the crime scene, which frankly is one I'd expect you to check first anyway. I would hope. What kind of detectives are you? But everything else we'll avoid showing. The lead I've chosen to follow here tells us to examine card number 102. We locate it by just looking in the corners until we find that number. Then we pull that card out of the deck and put it face up on the table, but don't look at the other side of it unless you're instructed to. First, check to see where you need to go to follow that lead. In this case, it says the campus, and that's where we're currently located, so nothing would happen. If the lead lists a different location on the board from where you are, then first move the car to that new location and spend 1 hour of time as you're reminded of here. When time is spent, move your time marker down its track the required number of hours. The lead we originally drew didn't require travel because it occurred at the campus where we already were, so I'll just reset this. However, whether you moved or not, the lead itself will take a certain amount of time for you to investigate, which is shown here beside the clock symbol. So in this case, the lead will cost us 1 hour, which we now spend on the track. In this way, each lead you follow will reduce the remaining time that you have before you must file your final report. And when the marker reaches or passes 5 hours remaining, you pause the game to perform what is known as a final brainstorm. During the game, players will of course be openly sharing lots of theories and ideas, but this is a formal opportunity for players to stop and one by one, each state what they personally believe the solution is and why. This can help the players start to refocus their ideas, especially since the investigation is almost over. If the time marker is here, finish resolving the investigation that moved it into this space, and then the investigation is immediately over and it's time to file your final report. And although you always count each one of these spaces as an hour, at the end of the game it's a little different. For example, if you were here and you followed a lead that would normally cost 1 hour to travel and then 2 more hours for the lead itself, that's okay. You still get to resolve it even though technically you only had 1 space you could move of the 3 required. You have a little more flexibility with that final lead. Okay, so going back to following a lead, once you've spent any of the required time, you now read the card's text out loud to the players. And although we don't have an example of it on this particular card, sometimes you'll see the acronyms LSL, MSL, or HSL beside something a person is saying. This indicates whether they have a low, medium, or high stress level. And the higher the stress level, the more likely they're lying, hiding something, or having a strong emotional reaction. So keep that in mind as you're interpreting what they're saying. Some leads will have further instructions like this in bullet point form, which you must follow in order. For example, here you're told to read an autopsy report by entering 101 into the files section of the database. And then you'd examine an iPhone and related documents by entering 101 in the other section of the database. Also, if you encounter any signatures, you enter those as well. Sometimes you'll find this symbol at the bottom of a card, and that means that after reading the front, you can flip it over and read its other side. But if it shows this symbol with it, then you can choose to spend a skill token from the team's supply, and if you do decide to spend that token, then you can flip the card over. This is called digging deeper. You have to make that decision to dig deeper at the moment you come to that option on the card, because you won't be able to put this aside, return to it later, and dig into it then. So decide if you feel there's something extra worth discovering here or not, because once you run out of these skill tokens, you won't be able to dig deeper anymore. Now that said, in rare cases you might be forced to follow more than one lead card at a time, because one lead will instruct you to read another one. If that happens, you pause the card you're on, read and fully resolve the new one, and then come back and finish the old one. In that situation, you can still choose to dig deeper into the first lead, even though you had to stop and resolve the other one, because in that case, you had no choice. But otherwise, just remember, you normally must decide if you're going to dig deeper when the card is first read. Finally, some leads will provide a further lead section like this, and you can write these leads down as they're new ones you can choose to follow at any time by drawing the indicated cards from the deck. But remember, you will not have time to follow every lead in the game, so you need to choose wisely. Once you've finished with a lead, put it on the left side of the board if you've accessed both sides of it, or to the right of the board if you only saw its front side. In other words, if we hadn't chosen to dig deeper. This is important because you can always look at the cards you saw previously, but you need to remember which ones you can check both sides of, the ones here, and which ones you can only check the fronts of, the ones here. Okay, so that covers following a lead and digging deeper, but I should also point out that at any time you can browse the database, and it doesn't cost you any of your time. Just go into it and check anything you've unlocked there. But note, you can only add information to the database when you're instructed to. You should not be punching in random numbers here hoping to get a hit. Also, we already saw an example in the setup of how the game might instruct you to gain a portrait. And some leads will do this as well, but if a lead ever asks you to retrieve a portrait that you already have, just ignore that instruction. You already have it. And those are all the rules for pursuing your investigation. But remember, you can take any notes you like and write things down, draw maps, pin photos to a corkboard and draw connections to them with red bits of string. Immerse yourself in the experience as much as you like. But once you get to the final report space of the time track, it's time to submit your findings. To do this, go into the database and select Final Report, where you'll be prompted with a series of multiple choice questions, one after the other, which I won't spoil here, so we won't look at these. As a team, you'll decide how to answer each question, remembering that the answers won't be on a specific card. They'll come from the deductions you draw from your investigations. The case will then evaluate your answers based on 3 factors. Questions related to the goals of the case are worth the most points. Some points you'll automatically gain based on certain evidence you uncover during the investigation, which are worth less points. And sometimes you'll get questions related to the background of the case, which are worth the least points. Once you've finished your report, the database will calculate your final score. But don't worry if it's lower than you expected. Being a detective isn't easy, and it's very difficult to get a perfect score. But no matter the outcome, you can then replay the case if you'd like to try to get a better score, or go into a new one. Keeping in mind that each time you play the same case again, the case itself won't change, but you might wish to try exploring different leads. To reset the case, just ensure you have all of its cards. The first number on a card will tell you which case it is for, and then once you're sure they're all face up, a B will be on their backside. Resort them into their original order. Then under the final report section in the database, you'll find an option to reset the case as well, so any data from the last attempt is removed. And with that, you now know how to play Detective Season 1. Remember, if you want even more cases to play, you can find several more in the original Detective game and its expansions. But if you have any questions about anything you saw here, feel free to put them in the comments below, and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. You'll also find forums for discussion, pictures, other videos, and lots more over on the games page at Board Game Geek, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like, subscribing, and clicking that little bell icon so you get notification anytime we post a new video. But until next time, thanks for watching.